Hi, welcome to this week's Fundraising Friday. This week we're talking about budgeting, grant budgets, organization budgets, how to create them, how to read them, and what they mean for your organization. So let's start with just an overview of what we mean when we talk about a budget. A budget is a prediction. Generally, it's made early in the year or prior to the start of a fiscal year, and it says, what are the sources of income we think we'll have for our organization, and what are the expenses that either we know we have or we think we're going to have, so that we can make sure that we have the plans in place to have more income than we have expenses. If there's a negative, then the question becomes, okay, where are we going to find the revenue to pay those expenses, or what expenses can we cut? It's really no different than a household budget, where hopefully for your household, you're looking at what money's coming in, what are our expenses when you're deciding whether or not you can afford something extra, or even whether or not you can afford, a nicer apartment, a bigger house, etc. So, how do you create an organization budget? For many of you at larger organizations, you might have a finance department or some directors who create the budget either for your team, for your program, or for your organization. But for smaller organizations where it might just be a couple people, you need to sit down and create your budget. We've worked with some fairly new organizations who've never had a budget. It's just kind of been as money came in, they spent it, or, it was the founder who was funding the operation. And as the founder had the money to invest, they would invest. And while that is wonderful, and kudos to all of you who operate that way, if you're looking to do more formal fund development, if you're looking to write grants, that just isn't going to fly. So if you don't have an organizational budget, the best place to start is to look at your expenses from the previous year. Last Fundraising Friday video talked about profit and loss statements and balance sheets, and your profit and loss statement is a really good place to start. What did you spend last year on salaries or on whatever the specifics things is that you are providing in your nonprofit? So it might be if you're food pantry and you're distributing food, how much did you spend for food last year? If you're giving out books, what did you spend on books, etc. And then don't forget the other expenses that come with being an organization, your insurance, your internet, your computers, everything that goes into making your organization run. Then look at those expenses from last year. Do you know something's going to increase this year? Put in that increase. For example, if your rent increases by 3% every year, make sure you budget in that increase. If you know your insurance is going to cost more this year, budget in that. And then look at what you'd like to do. Once you figure out your have-tos, you'd like to give your staff a 2% raise. Budget that in and see whether or not you can afford that. Look at your income sources. Will those increase this year? Don't just say on a wing and a prayer, we're going to bring in 10% more in grants because that's what we need to balance our budget. Instead, that will help you develop your plan. And we've got other resources that talk about how to develop a fund development plan, both in previous Fundraising Friday videos and in Nonprofit Tips and Tidbits. So that's how you create your organization budget. Often you'll also need a program budget. So you need to look at what does it cost to operate that particular program. So it's a portion of your overall budget. So which staff operate that program? What are the specific expenses of that program? So if you've got a food program and you've got a clothing distribution center and you're donating books and you're giving away things like bus passes, etc., for the people you serve, each of those could be considered a different program. So what are the direct expenses for each of those? What are you writing checks for? What's the staff requirement for each of those? You might be able to say, okay, so each of these is a quarter of what we do, so we can divvy up the staff expenses by 25%. Maybe you have dedicated staff for each of those, and you can identify the direct cost of those staff for each program. Then you've got the overhead, those expenses like insurance, rent, internet that you're going to pay regardless of what the program is. That's when you figure out, okay, what percentage of your operation is each program, and then apportion those overhead expenses accordingly. Again, using the previous example, if each of those truly is a quarter of my operation, then you could divvy up those overhead expenses 25% to each. But if mainly what you do is distribute food and that's 75% of what you do, then I would just apportion 75% of my overhead to your food budget and then figure out what the other programs are as a percentage of your overall. It's not as complicated as it seems. A good Excel spreadsheet with lots of formulas is a great way to create your budget. That will allow you to create different scenarios, see whether or not it balances, see what's realistic until you come up with something that makes the most sense for you. That's this week's Fundraising Friday. Thanks. Have a great weekend.